I'm Jim Collison and live from Omaha, Nebraska, and the Gallup offices in Singapore. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on January 11th, 2016. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during the webcast, we do have a live chat room that's available for you. It's right below the main video window. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, you can send us an email. Just send that to coaching@gallup.com. Or you can use the contact form right there on the live page. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just Gallup-Strengths-Center.com for all your coaching resources and StrengthsFinder training needs. You can also catch the video of both streaming and now downloadable audio for offline listening to past shows on your mobile device. All the links are available, including the Top 5 app. If you can't remember your Top 5, you can now get that on your iPhone or Android device. All available on our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. Ann Lingenfelter is our host today. She works as a learning solutions consultant with Gallup normally in the Sydney office, and you've made your way to Singapore. Welcome to another Call to Coach.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's nice to be here. I think I'm going to get one of those global maps where you put the little pin and I can put all of the Call to Coaches that I've done in all of the various countries, because it seems like I'm always one place or another, but always good to be here, so thanks for that. My guest today is Andrew Jones. Andrew is an executive coach that's based here in Singapore. He has a global practice covering business leaders, high potentials, and business owners. He's also an MBA career coach at INSEAD and Singapore Management University. He's a passionate developer of people with 23 years of global leadership experience in corporate and consulting roles based in Asia. Before launching his independent coaching practice, he worked at Deutsche Bank for 13 years, where he was managing director in HR, IT, and operations, so wore lots of hats. Andrew is British and trained in coaching at the Ashridge Business School in the UK, and he also holds the INSEAD Master's degree in Coaching and Consulting for Change. Andrew, welcome for Call to Coach.
Hi, good day, Anne. Thanks for having me here today.
Our pleasure, and thank you in advance for your openly sharing your tips and tricks about your success in using the strengths-based approach. We have to start off with your top 5 because that's why we're here. So we'll start with that.
Sure, of course. Thanks, Anne, and thank you for the introduction. Yeah, my top 5 themes are self-assurance, context, adaptability, maximizer, and strategic.
And is there any one of those that really resonates for you, that just jumps out and you think says you?
Well, I think I could have, when I did StrengthsFinder and went through that discovery process, I think I could have, before taking the assessment, I could have found my way to say things like maximizer and strategic. But what really surprised me, what I found quite novel, were the other 3, the top 3. So the framing as self-assurance, context, and adaptability. It wouldn't have occurred to me to describe myself in that way, but having discovered more about that, it became rang very true, and has been very helpful in some of my further personal development.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a bit about how you did come to know your strengths. How were you introduced to it?
So I think I came to StrengthsFinder quite late in life. I'd seen the book, I'd bought the book, I'd had the book for some time, and I think 3 years ago now I took the assessment, and worked through the reports, found it, as I said, quite insightful, quite useful, and then I moved on to take the coaching certification. It's been a journey of discovery for me, and as I use the strengths lens, I've seen a lot about myself looking back that maybe means I regret taking the assessment so late. My personal philosophy, through my leadership and HR practice in my career in corporate and as an individual now, is really to help people identify their potential and to realize their potential. That I discovered over the years is my passion. That's where I've really got my kicks as a leader, as a HR professional, and now as a coach. That's what I love to do. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I guess it's no surprise then that I've found quite an affinity for strengths, having discovered it, because that's pretty much the same philosophy. It's about helping people identify where they have the opportunity to be the best that they can be. So I've found it a very easy transition, in fact no transition at all, to work with strengths, to develop the strengths philosophy in my practice.
Do you find that you have to sell the approach, the strengths-based approach, to clients, or do you find that they typically welcome it and embrace it?
That's an interesting question when you say sell. I think only to the extent that one has to sell any personal development activity, any reflection, any personal development planning, and then any work to fulfill that plan. So there are many ways to work on oneself. There are many lenses to look at oneself, to develop the awareness, and then to go to work on oneself. I don't find one has to work particularly hard to sell the strengths lens. If anything, it's relatively easier. It's easy, I think, chiefly because of its simplicity and its positivity. Right? It's the positive language that makes it maybe not so scary as some other ways of looking at ourselves are. Some psychometrics out there and some other sort of well-known personal development processes. They can be quite forbidding because of the kind of language about weakness and the problems you have, identifying, where you're going wrong, identifying your derail, how you're derailing now or how you will derailing in the future. What I think easier to take on about strengths is the positive approach. Yeah, let's look at those areas of practice, your practice, where you have the potential to be great.
I guess the reason I framed, I guess the reason I framed it in that way is, for some people, I've heard a bit of pushback, saying that the simplicity and the positivity actually is the problem. They think, this all sounds too good to be true. It sounds too easy and too simplistic. And if you're just focusing on your strengths and not, addressing other, the weaknesses and competency development, there's no value in it. That's probably the one I'm referring to. Do you see that at all?
I think the way in is positive. So a couple of comments on what you said. I mean, none of us are naive enough here to say that we don't have weaknesses and that we shouldn't work on those weaknesses if it makes sense for us to do so. But that we should not overlook the positive, where we have the potential to grow, where we have the potential to be at our best. So in terms of introduction of strengths, I think these are good messages. Yeah? That balance. It's not all about, okay, let's do the gap analysis. Where are you today? Where do you want to be? What's all the things that are broken about yourself that we're going to go and fix? That's not a coaching approach. It's so easy to sell, to use your words.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's about talking about about balance in how we position things. And yes, I said simple. I think it's simple to get the framing concept of strengths, but I do want to differentiate that, and I think we're going to talk about this quite a lot in this program. I want to differentiate the framing concept of strengths from what you get. And what I mean by that is we all know there are millions and millions of potential combinations of the top 5 themes that we can have when we take the assessment. And in my time of using strengths, I've never found 2 people with the same 5. So the outcome, what you take away as your either your full 34 or your top 5 strengths, is different. It's full of many layers of subtlety. You can see them, especially in the Strengths Insight report, where you see all the subtlety of your full 34 is very powerful. And so in that way, not simple.
Mm. No, I like that, the whole idea of sort of peeling the layers, and a lot of people do think that it seems quite simplistic, and because of that, don't give it the credit that it deserves. When you talk about the differentiating between the framing concept from the outcome, is another way to say that to be moving from just strengths discovery to sort of strengths transformation and application? Is that what you mean?
Well, I think the framing of here we're going to look at where we have the potential to be the best that we can be. Let's identify the themes where you can be at your best. And then let's go to work on it, for me, is a simple concept. And to introduce to an organization or into a coaching discussion the strengths approach, that makes it quite easy. Now, what's great about strengths is out of that we get then the reports, that is your top 5 or your full 34, and the richness and complexity that we can mine for there, and then go to work on. So sure, the name it, claim it, aim it approach. Yes, we get the report, and then we go to work. But I think that I would say, just to put this complexity and give it its full due, I think there are other approaches to personal development. There are other psychometric tools that do pigeonhole people, that do pigeonhole teams. You can create a very simplistic grid of 4, 8, 16, however many boxes, and put people in boxes. And there are many strengths to those tools, but I think I see a real distinction between them and strengths. In strengths, every person gets an individual, different view of themselves. And there is not the temptation to say, oh yes, I'm one of those as well. I'm in the same box as you, so I don't need to talk about me, especially in a team context. So I think that's where it's quite powerful.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you use other tools. What other tools do you have, and are there any that you find particularly well aligned in combination with strengths?
I use a range of, let's say, psychometric and developmental tools with my clients. I'm a great fan of Hogan, of the EQI tools, of MBTI, and some others, 360 tools, etc. And they all have their place. Where I see strengths particularly outstanding and useful is working with teams, junior teams. I use it across the whole spectrum of organizations, all the way up to the C-level, but especially with junior teams because of the strengths we've been talking about here, the simple concept and the rich output.
Is there so then in the life cycle of a client within an organization, you think then junior teams, perhaps sort of in the storming and forming stages, that sort of thing, there's a good application there. Do you find it really works particularly well in any other context? So for instance, you've worked across multiple cultures, multiple locations, multiple industries. Have you found certain sweet spots where it's really resonated?
Yes, I think especially in Asia, I find StrengthsFinder can offer a lot of richness when you're bringing teams together for the first time, or to do some kind of reset with a team, or some kind of, let's say, annual planning process. In Asia, there's a tendency for some tools to be maybe misapplied, or to create outcomes to label, let's say, the majority of the team introvert. Or I've seen in some cases, even with let's say with MBTI tool, a large percentage of the group self-identifies ISTJ. Now, this is not a complaint about the tool. The tool is not at fault here, but what that creates is a cohort within the team that then is not necessarily challenged to look at themselves. Mm. They're looking at the pigeonhole they fit into. And then, and there's no then further challenge with that approach to say, how am I different within this group? Now, the strengths comes to the rescue here, because you can see the differentiation in the team straight away. You can go one layer down, a couple of layers down, and everybody has their own set of 5, their own top 5. And this is a great tool to help people look at what's going on in the team and look at what's going on for themselves.
Mm.
Yeah. So very much strengths is a lever for taking people out of these pigeonholes, yeah? For helping people to see themselves a little bit differently.
I like that. One of the things I noticed repeatedly on your website when I was having a look, you talked about learning in the moment. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, how that looks?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So I'm a great believer in the psychodynamic approach to coaching and to working with teams. And to keep it very simple, usually in a team situation, when we create a workshop, we have a primary task. We're working on a project, we're doing some action learning, maybe we're building a pyramid from spaghetti, or we're sharing in a group about our strengths. And that's the primary task. What I'm always encouraging the team to do is to reflect then on the group process. So as we build the pyramid, or as we discuss our strengths, what do we see happening in the room? What's happening in the moment? Are we replaying maybe the dramas from the office? Are maybe the relationships that don't work so well back at the coalface playing out here amongst us? What are we seeing? Some things that we can work on here in the moment that will benefit us when we go back to work. So that's what I mean, looking at what's happening in the moment.
What about pod coaching? Is that the same? Does that fall into the scenario you just described? Is that what that looks like?
Certainly in terms of having a process. So my pod coaching approach is to bring together a group of, say, 4 to 8 individuals from within an organization. They're usually not from the same team. So they can come from a high potential program, that's normally the source, or for other reasons they're coming together maybe over a year's duration to meet together once a month in a group. We normally in advance name the topic we're going to work on, so maybe influencing skills, relationship building, making tough decisions, so that the folks can reflect on that before we gather in the circle. And then we work on that through a process to reflect on experiences, questions they have about the subject. And it's not a top-down teaching process from me. My job is to facilitate that. Hopefully the folks in the team will be able to help each other with sharing their experiences, with referring to other things that have happened in their shared or individual professional experience. That's the pod coaching. And as you're right, exactly the same thing happens there, because we have a task, but we can also reflect exactly what's happening in the moment. So if somebody's grabbing the mic all the time, always dominating the floor, dominating the conversation, hopefully somebody from in the circle will reflect that to them and say, does that inform you about your day-to-day practice? If they don't get it from the circle, then it's my job as a facilitator to bring that to them.
So you said they don't come, the people who are in the pod coaching scenario don't come from the same team. Do they come from the same company, or is it more like a peer support community of people who are in the similar roles but in different organizations?
So normally, yes. So that's how I started this, developed this format for organizations. Subsequently, we've started using it. I'm doing some pro bono coaching. I have been with entrepreneurs for some years, and now I've started doing some more formal coaching with groups of entrepreneurs. And to give them a space to go through a similar process to support each other, I've started using it as more of an open subscription forum. So people come from their own startups, not from one organization. And now, based on the success of that, we're thinking about developing this as an open program.
Very interesting. So when you look at your client base, what percentage of your clients are one-on-one coaching, and how much team coaching are you doing?
Yeah, so about 50% of my time is spent working one-on-one with individuals, and then the rest of my time is half and half. The business school work, so working with MBAs and other postgraduate students, either in a more of a formal teaching scenario, doing career strategy work, or one-to-one career counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And the other 25% is then the teamwork, working with groups, either management teams or the kind of pods we've been talking about just then.
I want to go into a bit about the education space and the career counseling work that you're doing, but before we go there, can you give us some examples, specific examples of success stories that you've had around strengths, whether it's been based in the pod coaching work that you've done or the one-on-one work? I think everyone always likes to hear about how it's working for different coaches' clients.
Yes, of course, as a coach, I have to be very careful about confidentiality.
Of course, yes.
and
names.
That's my number one commitment to all my clients is confidentiality. So I think if I have to think of one, give one. I was working with a PhD student last year who'd kind of hit, we might call writer's block or researcher's block, or had reached a point where the research was done and the time to write had come. Yeah? And this was a bit of a pivotal point in the PhD process. But she was not moving forward. And she had a love for research. She couldn't stop doing the research. Yeah? And she was very good at it. She enjoyed it. And so we had a talk about this, and I suggested to her, not in a formal coaching way, but let's take a look at your strengths. Have a look. What light could this shine on the situation? So she did that, and then we got together and did had a coaching session to look at the reports. And no surprise that input was her number one. And this kind of made sense to her straight away. So it was like one of these situations where you don't need to do much as a coach. It runs very fast. Yeah? For somebody for somehow an external source to tell you, you're a great researcher, you love it, you can't stop collecting these vignettes, you can't stop interviewing people. This was an aha moment for her. This was a moment when she was able to get in control of this, to honor, and I think it's probably the first time she did this, to honor the fact that she has this strength, to honor the fact that she's outstanding at it. But that honoring itself helped her to draw a line. So it's not that I had to do some sophisticated process then to help her go from where she was to where she could be. Just taking the assessment, in a way, helped her to reframe.
Mm-hmm.
Quite dramatic.
How heavy of a hand do you have to have in prescribing some steps that can be taken in order to sort of move beyond that? So, I hear you saying that sometimes just the awareness of it and the acceptance of it is enough. But for others, they can stay stuck in that and say, I'm embracing my love for research or my high input, but don't seem to be able to move away from that to execute or to influence. How heavy of a hand do you have in prescribing homework or rules around diary planning or those sorts of things to help reflect that issue?
So first, as a coach, you have to be comfortable that people move at their own speeds. People start from different places and they move at different speeds. So before a team coaching, for instance, I get them all to do their assessment. So some people will come with heavily annotated insight reports. They've done a lot of work on themselves. They've downloaded the book. They've read the book. They probably have the whole family do strengths as well. And some people haven't even read the report. Okay.
Right.
So you have to start from the point of the slowest and move them through it. And that's the same case in a one-to-one coaching. It's interesting just to see people come into the room with their report, how they physically relate to their report. If they put it down on the table, if they're a little bit distant from it, that's an indicator that maybe they found something there that makes them feel a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah? Again, lots of highlighters, flags, and lots of note-taking indicates the opposite. So one encourages them to go on a journey. One challenges them and asks them questions about what they've read, what they've seen. And we as strengths coaches know that process. Now, what people do, how people then do their work is also great material. So if we're coming back to the second session and they haven't done their homework, well, what does that tell us about this situation here? Yeah? Maybe that's in itself an illustration of what the problem is. I always say before we start the coaching to them that the coachees will set themselves homework. That's where I try to get them, is that it's evident for themselves what the work is they want to do, and I encourage them to be time-bound about it and to have a nice smart objectives for themselves to get them through to the next coaching meeting. Now, that's not always possible, and whether the way they architect the homework for themselves or the way they do it is, as I said, often a signal, another learning in the moment opportunity to show what is really their attitude to the objective they're working on.
I know that Jim has a few questions from the chat room that I want to get to in just 2 seconds, but before we go there, how do you measure the impact of your work with these clients?
Well, that is the question that all coaches love and hate. We have this love-hate relationship with this question, right? How do you measure? In a way, we have to not be too precious about this. Oftentimes as coaches, we will not see the result. We will never see the result. We cannot know. It's Heisenberg's uncertainty principle in operation. We cannot know because we will never be in the situation maybe where the challenge that they've been working on applies. It's the feedback from the client. Of course, there is always the syndrome where the client wants to please the teacher. That does happen, and you have to challenge them. But it's the feedback. It's the feedback.
Very good. Jim, you have a few questions in the chat room?
Yeah, we do. You do from the chat room. Well, actually, this one's mine, Andrew. You had said in Asia when we work with teams, and I'm always, when we do, we do these in the United States, we do these there in Singapore and India and Australia, and we've talked with people in the UK as well as Germany as well. Do you see, when you think about Asia, and you might come at it because you're originally from the UK, do you see some unique team dynamics that exist in Singapore? And when we think about adding the team grid or strengths to it, that might be different than if you were doing it back home. Or do you see any differences, or is it all pretty much, are teams the same all around the world, do you think?
No, that question deserves a book in response. Right?
Well, there you go. There's your book.
Or to write one. Look, let's not be naive here. Okay, so there is immense amount of diversity in Asia, and that's the first thing I learned when I arrived many years ago. There is the society, culture, working culture, on many dimensions. This part of the world is so different, so differentiated. As we move from India to Singapore to China, Japan, Australia, everywhere has a different culture. Everywhere has different norms. Some very elaborate cultures of politeness in some countries. So you have to be very careful and very difficult to generalize. And we're also so mixed up now. So I would say, as I've worked with teams based physically in Singapore, I don't recall a time when I've worked with only Singaporeans in a team. And I think that applies in all the other countries I've worked. So they're very diverse. There are a few, generalizations I think you can see sometimes from statistics about strengths and other of the providers that have done, personality profiling across countries. There are some generally reported differences, and I think you can see those come through. So some of the cultures here, they tend to a little bit more towards introversion. Sure. And in some of the dimensions you can characterize them. But as I said before, that's the beauty of strengths. You can dig down a level. So I think that's the power of strengths in Asia, that you can get past, in many ways you can get past the discussion about some of those cultural norms.
And what kind of advice, if I had a new coach in Singapore and they were coming to this new and brand new for the first time, any kind of advice that you would give around the strengths movement as far as getting started or working with teams, of things that you've learned, since you came out of the course?
Well, I think you need to be provocative and challenging as a facilitator. Sometimes more so in let's say pick Singapore as one culture. I'm not generalizing now about Asia. So, for instance, we have great material for Gallup coaches around strengths, and we provided with lots of material, lots of tools, exercises for teamwork. And from the beginning, I've loved that tool we use that talks about when am I at my best, when I'm at my worst, what I need from you, what I have to offer. This is a great exercise. When I used it the first time, I noticed though that when I was having each member of the team introduce themselves, they would present their top 5, they bring a picture from the pack, and also introduce themselves in those 4 quadrants. That was great. We had some moving conversations. We had lots of lovely interaction with the team. But I was thinking to myself, well, where has this gone? Where has this material gone, this wonderful sharing? Where is this as an asset to the team? Because I didn't see anybody writing anything down. Now, mate, I don't know how this plays out in the US. You can tell me. But so what I've done here, when I now do this exercise in Singapore, is I've produced another template, which I give to everybody else in the team, so that they can make a note for themselves. Okay, what is it that I can offer the speaker? What is it that the speaker can offer me? And so that I get the team to inventory, in a way, the manifestations of their team strengths, and where all their colleagues need their strengths, if you see what I mean. So that's what I mean by being provocative and challenging.
No, I think you bring up a good point. I think this would work in the United States just as well as it works there in Singapore, in the sense that sometimes we do these exercises and it ends with the person's presentation, as opposed to what you're saying is, okay, I'm getting some great valuable data from this person who's in some cases, if it's done right, who's opened up to fantastic insights on themselves. And we don't necessarily always have the mechanisms, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this and some of the things we're doing, but don't always have the mechanisms to capture that. So I appreciate that on the backside, to say, hey, I should probably capture, since I'm working with these people on these teams, I should probably spend some time. It's great in the moment, but we also have to capture those things in place to say, okay, because afterwards I need to be able to do things with this data that I've gathered, right? That's a great, Andrew, that's a great example, and I appreciate you sharing that. And any insight when you think about some of the things you've gone through, any insight from your side?
Look, I think that it's really important for the coaches to, when they leave, to actually put it on the team to say, we need to be following up with this. We need to be, let's talk about, let's touch base again. If it's only a one-off session, let's touch base again in 3 weeks' time and see what's happened with this. Because I think often we hear coaches who will say, I ran an intervention with a team, or I did a workshop, and then I met with them again, 2 months later, or heard that actually nothing had happened on the heels of it. And I think, from my perspective, it's our responsibility to put it out there, that what's going to be next, what's the outcome that we hope to happen from today, and how can we track that, how can we look at that, how can we revisit that. So often, I mentioned before a bit about homework. It was their homework, Andrew, that you gave your clients, and it sounds like they choose it for themselves. Is that what you said?
That's my challenge to them, yes, to set their own homework. But in a team situation, of course, you've got two levels of client. You've got the organization as well as the folks who are going to be in the room. And these days, HR people who are buying development interventions are very savvy. And one of the first questions they ask is, well, how does this stick? We're not just paying for the folks to have a nice day out in a room somewhere having a chat, and sharing. What we want is an intervention that sticks. I want something that is going to last here, that's going to take them on a journey. So I see it as my responsibility to have a meaningful experience, but to find ways, simple, digestible ways, and already Strengths, Gallup offers many ways to do this, to offer ways to make this a sustainable experience. Yes, great. Let's have our top 5 up by our desk so everybody can see. Fantastic. But trying to think of other ways to make this a sustainable experience.
And I think one of the things I appreciated about your website when I was having a look was it was obvious that you really differentiate between the coaching, career counseling, and mentoring, and really upfront understanding whose agenda is being addressed in the room. So if you are being hired by a corporation, who's deciding the conversation that's taking place there. So how do you formalize that? How do you handle that in advance?
So with organizations that are contracting these kind of services, the commitment in a coaching, if we're going to have a coaching conversation, a coaching relationship with one of their employees over time, the frame is coaching and very much it's confidential. Okay, and I would start. I work in a series of 8 coaching consultations with corporate clients, and we always start. The first meeting will be a 3-way meeting between the coachee, the coachee's direct superior, and myself in the room. So there's no question about what the objective is. Now later on, when there's just the 2 of us, the coachee may want to work on something else, but at least it's very clear in that room the first time what the objective is. And then at the 8th meeting, the final meeting, will be another 3-way meeting with the boss. So to add that the accountability to the process, that there's been some money spent here on your development. Now we're going to talk about what the results are. But whatever happens in those meetings in between is confidential. And that may mean that we go off in a different direction. It may be about career questions, is there the right place for me to work, or it may become a mentoring discussion. And I make the differentiation between coaching and mentoring very clear, because giving advice, reflecting on past experience, to me is mentoring. We can use our coaching skills in a mentoring conversation, but coaching, we're not giving advice, we're not telling. Okay? So we have to draw the line. One relationship can go across both, but we have to draw the line, be clear about what we're doing in the moment. And Strengths is a great supporter for both. I just say a word about career counselling, the third one. I think, again, I use Strengths a lot in my career counselling. And why? Especially for people who are coming out of a job, who've been made redundant, retrenched, who are looking to do something new. They're often in execution mode. They need to find the next thing to do very quickly. And the challenge for us when we're in job search mode is to find what's unique about us, find what's special about us, find the transferable skills that we have to offer the world of potential employers. And whether we're looking at the things we want to do that motivate us, that interest us, or the things that we can do, our capabilities, our skills, our experiences, the network, again, having the diversity of the themes in Strengths is very helpful for people to kind of stand outside themselves, to get out of the standard everyday work they do. I'm great at analytics, or I'm a great salesperson, and stand outside themselves and have another view. And oftentimes this suggests to them other possibilities and other ways to sell themselves to potential employers.
How do you handle clients, Andrew, who don't want to be there, who just don't want to be in that session, don't want to be in the room? You feel like they're either being sent there because they're not performing, or they're problematic. How do you handle that? You have a big smile on your face. You must love those clients.
Well, it's a question that comes up all the time, right? So this happens sometimes in a corporate situation where somebody's been identified for coaching, or this person can benefit from coaching, or maybe this person needs some coaching because the next stop is the door. And these are not good conversations to have with HR people or business leaders, but still. Look, in the end, to go on any change journey, you have to want it. The individual, the coachee, has to want it. So you have to want coaching. So how do we get there? It's not that coaching is the answer to everything. If somebody comes into the room saying, look, I don't know why I'm here, I don't want coaching, I don't need coaching, I would encourage them to start reflecting, and different ways for different engagement styles. I would encourage them to start reflecting on what is this that's coming out of them now. This resistance, this pushing back, this awkwardness maybe. I would ask them, just again learning in the moment, what does this tell us? Is this something that comes up regularly in their professional practice? Is this representative of their general relationship with the organization, with their boss? What does that tell them? Now, pushing them in, that's often a very different direction than they expect to have when they come in the room. Yeah, they're expecting to be told how to get better at something. Mm-hmm. That often sort of gets us past this resistance. They can see maybe there's some value here. Yeah? And one of my responsibilities as a coach is to be a mirror. And if they don't get it, if they don't see that they're being challenging or obnoxious or coming across as unmotivated, whatever it is, it's my job to say, I notice that as you're talking, I'm feeling a little bit intimidated, or I'm feeling a bit bored, or I'm feeling a bit concerned, or whatever it is, and offer that back to them. And often that is an aha moment, yeah? Because the people around them in the workplace won't tell them. They'll project it as something else. They'll refer to it as something else. They'll say, well, you need to improve your influencing skills. Where really they mean you've got to start talking to people.
Very good. That is our responsibility, isn't it, to be the mirror? I love that visual picture. Jim, do you have another question from the chat room?
Yeah, one more for you, Andrew. And we get this question a lot. For folks who've attended our courses, for you personally, what was the one moment in the course that gave you the most value? Like, you spent all week with us, you walk away, pick a point in there where you walk away and you go, man, that really changed me, or that really had a lot of value for me.
Right. And who's asked this question? Is this somebody from Gallup who taught the course?
This is somebody in the chat room.
Okay. That's a tough question, isn't it? That's not really a fair question. I think, as I said at the beginning, for me, the self-assurance, I wouldn't have called myself self-assured. And that was a really interesting insight to have. And so I guess the value for me has been to explore that. And then a realization, because people in that room were kind enough to offer back to me, well, the thought that, well, actually maybe it's your self-assurance that gives people the desire to be coached by you. They get the self-assurance that you're projecting creates something, some safe space, some level of confidence for the people who you work with. So if I had to pick one thing, and that was an insight from somebody that gave that very generously in the room, I would say that insight.
Do you find that you ever have clients who are intimidated by your self-assurance, and if so, how do you manage that?
Intimidated. I don't think so. So I wouldn't say it's. I hope it's not something that's arrogance or overconfidence. It's rather that people have made comments that I'm not phased by certain things. I'm not thrown out, and people have sort of shared some pretty strange and wild things with me. I have a reputation for staying calm, and that's something that's been true through all my career. Is I've been the sort of the eye of the storm, the person, the source of calm. If anybody would like to write to me offline that I've been intimidating, I'd love to get that feedback.
No, not at all. I'm sure that does actually, that calm place does provide, it gives them permission to be able to perhaps explore some of the issues that may put them off balance, because they find you to be a very stable place to go with that. So that's excellent. So, as a corporate person who spent so many years in, working for different companies, how hard was it for you to make that jump from a big organization to independent work? And as our time comes to an end here, any tips that you would have for those who perhaps have just made the same sort of transition? How have you been able to market yourself and your business and those sorts of things? What would be the top few tips you would share in that regard?
Okay. So my own transition came about really for wanting to sort of change lifestyle, to change the pace of life, and that was the trigger. And then I spent some time thinking about what are the things in life that are positive for me, what are my strengths, what do I love to do, what am I good at, making a list of these things, and also making a list of the things I wanted to do less of, to eliminate from life, and then generating some hypotheses. So I apologize, I've told this story many times to people who are now watching the video, and looked for which hypotheses were most attractive, and then I spent some time then exploring. And to be honest, that coaching was the first idea I had, and to really connect all of those things I love to do. And then I went to work on making that hypothesis real. And that took about a year to do the market research, the education, all the branding, all the things you have to do when you start a business. So it's preparation. I would say, independent of strengths, the most valuable asset in that journey was my network. So knowing people and having the confidence to reach out to people and talk about the future and talk about the new things I'm doing. So I think network is really important. And then I think, for folks who are strengths coaches who are looking to work independently, reflect on your strengths. What do they tell you? And don't work against yourself. If you're strong on communication, go see how that can help you as a professional. Help people with their communication, help people with presentation skills. If you're strong on input, don't try to be the presentation skills person. Focus on input. Go with. If you have great woo, then go out and network like crazy, and maybe help other people who are not so good at it as you sell what they have to tell the world. So I'm a great believer in first doing that work on yourself, identify who you are, what you are, and then find something to take to the world that is aligned with you, first of all. First be aligned with yourself. Align yourself with your strengths. Align your professional activity with your strengths, and then take it to the world. You'll be a much better professional for it.
Are there any resources that you particularly would like to suggest to the coaches that are out there? So any blogs that you follow, any people that you think, just some great resources that you rely on that you would suggest?
For starting a business, if we stick on that note, I often recommend Working Identity by Herminia Ibarra, which is a great book to help you reflect before you make the jump, because its thesis is experimenting with your future selves, with your possible future selves. So I like that book a lot. I recommend it a lot. I think for folks in work and managing, Peter Drucker's Effective Executive is always a good platform to start from. And for folks transitioning, Michael Watkins' First 90 Days is peerless in helping people move from one role to another, whether it's within or beyond organizations. And then if you need help with your networking, I guess the most popular book with my students is always Steve Dalton's The 2-Hour Job Search. And that's a very practical guide to just how to invite people for a coffee and what to say and how to get the most out of the opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I think that I will definitely have a look at some of those. Last question from me. Is there anything that you feel that I've missed or that you wish I would have asked that you think is important to mention before we close?
Thanks, Anne, for asking. I think we've had quite an expansive discussion. We talked about a lot of material here. I don't think so. I think we've covered everything.
Great.
Thank you.
Jim?
Andrew, thank you for coming on. I'll mention your website again, andrewtheexecutivecoach.com. That's you, right? I got the right place. Good looking website as well. It's worth a look if you're a coach and you're thinking about maybe the way your website could look. Andrew has a very good looking website out there. Andrew, thank you. As I've gotten to know you in the last 45 minutes or so, I think you'd be a great coach for me in the sense that self-confidence, that quietness, that thoughtfulness. I'm all woo, communication, act, emotions on my sleeve, act before I think. And I've really just gotten a good sense from you that kind of style that you come with and why you're so valuable to the organizations that you coach in. So thanks for coming on today. I'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. Send us your questions or comments if you'd like to be a guest blogger. We're still taking those if you're thinking about doing that. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line so we know where to route that to so we can get the instructions out to you. It's kind of a little bit of an audition system. So you'll write some things, we'll check it out. Not everybody's able to make the blog, but we'd love to have you write for us if you'd like to do that. We are right now in the midst of the Gallup Weekly Strengths Wisdom series, started January of 2016. So if it's 2017, it's over and you missed it. You can still go back and watch it, though. We're doing one theme at a time, 1 week at a time, and we'll have webcasts and blog posts and all kinds of activities going on. Achiever is what we're working on. The very first one this week has just launched, and Theme Thursday will relaunch. Theme Thursday Season 2 will relaunch tomorrow, and we're excited to get that out. But connect with us on our Facebook group or YouTube page, iTunes, or RSS feeds. We've got iPhones and Android apps, everything you need to get things rolling. We'd like you to get involved in that, and if you found this helpful, we'd ask that you share it, and look forward to the next Call to Coach, and with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.